morning, world. Good morning, Miss McCosker. Good morning, our Regen Ag team and our Facebook pages on NRAD and Carbonate. Welcome to our second amazing Regenerate podcast. Vodcast is the new word I hear, Miss McCosker.
Yes, it's so wonderful. I'm really, I feel so privileged to have two amazing speakers, farmers, women who have been in this space, and that's Rachael Treasure and Nicole Masters, and we're just so lucky to have these incredible women on our vodcast. I was just speaking to Rachael and she said, "Where's my vodka?"
Yeah, vodcast for our audience is a video podcast, which, as we've known during this lockdown process, so many people have just spent the last 3 months getting their heads around Zoom and these podcast opportunities, and I can really feel there's going to be a massive surge of dynamic and amazing information hit the world because of us all getting our heads around Zoom and vodcast.
Whoa. So I think it would be a really nice opportunity now just to update everyone on Carbonate and what we're doing with REGENER8 and our film festival. So we've got an online Farmy Film Friday foodie film festival. So every Friday night we have been screening a wonderful regen ag and regenerative film. And on Friday we had The Seed, The Untold Story, and oh my gosh, I think we've had a 20,000 reach. I think we had over 1,500 tickets sold. So, and it's just the most wonderful story, and beautiful emails coming in just saying, I have never been so, my heart is broken, and this made me cry, and I'm so grateful for knowing this now. It's turned my whole awareness around what's going on in the conventional ag space. So it's created a lot of awareness. So I'm just really, really grateful to the Australian government and Parkshire Council who funded the film festival. And so next Friday night, this coming Friday, our film is going to be Community, The Power of Community. And it's a story.
My favorite.
Yeah, so it's a great one to watch out for. So check out the Facebook page and you'll be able to just register, and that's our next one. So that's
it's really exciting bringing these films back into our space, because obviously we've been following this journey we started watching the documentaries that came out around about 2008, so almost 10, 12 years ago. And these films are fundamental, and they never age, and there's such amazing testimonies to what it's taken to get this regen ag space into the mainstream. So working back through these documentaries and films is a real privilege and a total pleasure. I've really enjoyed watching every single one of them, and this one coming up, The Power of Community, was such a significant one. When I watched it, it really showed for me the power of community, how if you come together as a united front, the things that you can evolve and conquer and integrate and improve on is just profound. And it's a really moving film from Cuba, all about the Cuba Revolution, really profound. And it was the Aussies that went over to Cuba and introduced permaculture during this food crisis they went through. So really cool how it links back to the Australians once again in regards to solving our soily foodie problems.
Our soily, and as we say, Kelly Jones, it's the soilution. That's going on, mate. It's the soilution.
Every world crisis should be taken back to the soilution, because ultimately everything begins and ends with our soil.
That's right. And I think we're just really privileged to have Nicole here, who has been in that space for, amazingly, speaking around the world. So, and just to continue with Carbonate, just a little bit of an update. One of our big, so with some of the funding we got from Parkshire, we're supporting 300 farmers in the Parkshire, which is wonderful. So we're getting our book packs of Gabe Brown's Dirt to Soil, and also, of course, Nicole's amazing book that we'll find out more about a little bit later. So 186 of her books are going into the Parkshire area. So really wonderful.
I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And so, yeah, and some other little things that are happening in Carbonate, but I think everyone wants to hear. Shall we introduce Nicole?
Yeah,
so Nicole, let's introduce Nicole. And I think we'll show that we've got this beautiful video of Nicole that we found. So let's show everyone that and share that.
Yeah. I was just thinking about carbon, as you do. You know, carbon's been receiving a lot of attention like it's some kind of pollutant, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because carbon is a food. So we're thinking about what's happening here on the rangeland, and this represents some of the largest landmass potential in the world in terms of if we could bring carbon back to these landscapes, what a difference that would make. And we had an interesting conversation yesterday in the car about, well, there's been all these fossil fuel that's been released. You know, there's massive, you know, millions of years of carbon that's been underground and now being released up into the atmosphere, and surely we can't draw that down into the ground. And what you've got to remember is one of the biggest carbon sinks on the planet is the ocean. And so what we're seeing is that carbon accumulation in the ocean, which is leading to acidification of the seas, which is something we should all be very concerned about. And certainly people involved in the reef and what's happening with fish are very concerned about acidification. But out here, what would happen if we started to restore carbon? We would start to restore water cycles. We would start to see more nutrition. We would start to see real infrastructure in terms of creating this sponge that will slowly release water out into the down further. And you think of some of these catchments, I think this must drain to the west coast. Yeah. You think about that slowing of water instead of these flash flood drought events that we're seeing globally. So what would this landscape look like if we brought carbon back? Because we have lost typically between 30 to 60% of carbon in these environments. So if we have a look down, you can see that through some of this grazing management, look at this beautiful aggregate structure that we've got, and I can feel the moisture in there. So they have actually had some rainfall recently. See how we're seeing the soil actually stick to these roots? This is what we call the Rastafarian roots. Right, what would these soils look like if they were really, really functional? And I think we're starting to see more function being brought to these soils through the grazing management that Glenn and his team out at Alder Spring Ranch are actually doing. Thank you for your help. Anyway, I'm going to keep doing these kind of videos in future, and let's just kind of get that conversation going. Thanks for listening.
So Nicole Masters, how wonderful to have you here today. And that video, I actually, when I was going through finding some of your amazing. I've been following you for quite a while. And in terms of my journey of getting to know Nicole, so me and my husband Mike have been on this sustainable ag space for like 15 years, teaching farmers. And a lot of the farmers and a lot of the teachers that were out there were men, older men. And so when I saw you on a live YouTube, and you were amazing. You were standing on this, I can't remember what, you were standing on this platform and you looked amazing, this gorgeous woman who was so in your you knew your topic so well. I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. So, you know, I think that, you know, if you have a look at the video and because I think that you can really see when you speak that you have been through this process. You have that soil in your hands is in your DNA. So when you speak, you speak with authority and you speak with clarity and knowledge and wisdom. So I'm really, you know, so Nicole, hello, welcome to the program.
Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Helen. That's such a gorgeous introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you for getting hold of all those copies of my book. That's so exciting. And so the book came about. I didn't have any marketing people. I didn't have any support. It didn't get published. So I self-published. And what's been amazing is just the mycelial human networks of people really passionate about soil and really wanting to spread the message. So thank you for your support. It just wouldn't be possible without yours.
Oh, I remember when we found out you had a book coming out, we were like, Nicole's releasing a book. She's about to become a rock star farmer. We were so excited for you. We were like, we're ready. Get it into the smart box.
Yeah. Oh, it has been an amazing roller coaster of a ride. Yeah.
COVID didn't help. So we didn't do a book tour in the end, but it's, and I think probably people are reading more books because of COVID, maybe.
Yeah. So
on the topic,
I was just thinking,
Helen, on the topic of books,
Yes.
on the topic of books, it's been really interesting. So you have self-published your book, Nicole, and it's actually so tell us just very quickly a little bit about that journey for other teachers within the Regen Ag space who may be considering doing something as well. Like, was it an easy process, and have you received good support for it? How's it gone?
Yeah, I think it's gone really well. I mean, I have no idea. And I've spoken to a couple of my friends who are published, and they don't make any money off their books. But actually self-publishing means that anything that you're kind of generating, apart from the printing costs, you actually generate. So it's actually, doing a pretty good job at supporting me, I guess. And so I took it to publishers, and the ones that did reply wanted it to be more technical, wanted me to change the whole voice of it, wanted me to take the first line out of the book. And the first line of the book is, "I'm not normal." And I really like that. And I've had a lot of people approach me and go, "I'm not normal either." And I'm like, I know none of us are. And so it was kind of a really neat experience to just go, actually, I don't need publishing companies. And these days with the internet and with social media, I don't think we need the big publishing companies. I actually think that there is enough social networks, and if people like what they're reading, they're gonna share that. And so, yeah, I think now is the time for people that are self-publishing. And Dee Dee Pursehouse, who wrote The Ecology, was a real inspiration for me, and she's self-published, and her book is wonderful. And I've been to so many places, and you'll see her book on their bookshelf. I'm like, the networks are working.
Yeah, I'd really love, it's really exciting because we just had Rachael come in, and I'd like to perhaps, if Cal, why don't you do the intros for our amazing Rachael treasure?
Well, on the topic of published authors, we've got a book theme going through today. There's an amazing woman who has managed to blend the narrative of romance with regenerative agriculture. And, one thing that we know about Regen Ag and the whole space is partnering biodiverse things together means you're going to thrive. And when it comes to partnering Regen Ag with something completely unexpected, complete surprise, that would be romance. So we are going to introduce Rachael Treasure, an amazing woman who has done the unthinkable and brought some sexy, lusty love to this hot and dry topic of soil and carbon. So with that, let's play Rachael's intro video and bring her into this amazing conversation.
If we don't impart wisdom to our children, then we're failing, really. And motherhood is such a lost art. I came to that realisation when my children were really, really young, and the blokes on the farm were still insisting on spraying glyphosate. And my daughter had been born with mild cerebral palsy, and she's a delight. She's an amazing girl. Basically, my daughter has shown me a path forward as a mother to really find my voice and to say, we need to change. It was later on in drought when I heard a farmer, Colin Size. There was Colin at the front of the room, and he turned a light bulb on in my mind, and that was 10 years ago. And I have not stopped inquiring since and looking at Regen Ag as a pathway forward. White Horses is about women's wisdom and how if we live with this innate wisdom and feminine power that's not aggressive and it's not emulating men, then we can really lift everybody. I've created this most beautiful property in my mind that I've actually based on actual properties that I've seen in Australia where people have been practicing Regen Ag for 20, 30 years. So with White Horses, the storyline of Regen Ag carries through. And once people can see it in their mind's eye and they can feel it with emotion, then hopefully they'll actually change action in their lives and really look at landscape differently. That's what I'm hoping to do with all my novels, is to make people feel, and through that feeling think about things differently, and then love the people around them more and love the landscape around them. Rachael Treasure and Wattle here, my new puppy, with some exciting news. I have just emailed the first draft of my next novel to my agent in Sydney. It's called Milking Time, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. Connie Mulligan is my new character. She's a young dairy farmer's daughter, and she's witness to the devastation that we are causing to environment through industrial systems of agriculture, where there's overgrazing, bare earth, ploughing, which leaves us susceptible to bushfire and also to drought. In Connie's world, she can visualise a whole new way forward, and that's what this story's about, isn't it, Wattle? She heads off to Ireland, which is something I've done, and she discovers how dairy farming can be conducted in a way that supports animals and Mother Nature. And the good thing is about being a novelist and a farmer is I get to put this in practice. So here we have regenerative agriculture, which is simply a low input system, maybe a bit of Nutrisoil, and lots of time and rest and reading what Mother Nature is telling us. So Milking Time, it's headed to the agent. It's got to be rewritten and edited, but I just wanted to thank my readers, particularly the ones who did the gratitude journey with me for 100 days. So thank you, and look out for Milking Time coming to you soon.
So that was Rachael, and Rachael, thank you so much. Welcome to our hearty podcast.
I felt like I needed a vodka this morning. I had to get one child off to camp and one off to excursion. So a vodcast without vodka. Anyway, it's very early in the morning where I am in Tasmania. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our First Nation people, the Palawa people, who had this beautiful landscape, which we have tragically trashed, which is why we're here, because we can reclaim that Indigenous wealth that we are trashing by the day, and keeping it light, because, yeah, rising tide floats all ships. So that's what we're here to do today, I think.
Wonderful. We've just had a conversation with Nicole about books, and I've been really inspired. I have to say that I haven't read any of your books, Rachael. I'm sorry, but it's on my next book will actually be your book. I just wanted to let you know that when I was a teenager, I was a closet Mills and Boons reader.
You're out of the closet now.
I've got 3 sisters, and we were really big. And then I went to uni and I stopped reading romance novels, but I just love that you are incorporating, the whole this regen communities into it's just beautiful storytelling. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up a Tassie girl, and I was watching in 1968, I was born, so I saw the Vietnam War on telly. I'd go out to the farm that my dad was developing, and for me as a child, it looked exactly like the war zone that I was experiencing as a child. I felt that, and I'd get on my pony and I'd ride through native grasses and woodland, and then the next week it would have been bulldozed. So this really impacted me. Then I went to the mainland, which is mainland Australia, and I studied agriculture after Jillarooing and doing some other crazy stuff. And I noticed there was this corporate connection linking in. We were trying to do deals with China. We were taken to piggeries, rice fields, cotton fields. And as a Tassie girl who'd been taught by her grandparents to shoot and fish and trap and live from veggie garden and kill your own meat, I just looked at it and it sat so uncomfortably with me. And then I decided agriculture was off the pages in terms of mainstream media, so politically as well. So as a young woman, I thought, I'm going to write a cracker bestseller, and I'm going to showcase contemporary rural women in agriculture. And so that was 20 years ago now. So Jillaroo, it dealt a lot with rural youth suicide because we'd lost some college mates that way. So this was a book that was launched with seriousness at its heart, like deep seriousness. Like we're headed for trouble. 30 years on or 20 years on, we're headed for trouble. So under the guise of romance, I get to reach the women who are blanked out, tired, pushing their shopping trolleys through Big W or Kmart or wherever, and I get to reach into their hearts and minds and say, wake up, ladies, we need to empower ourselves and we need to do it fast. So that's, you know, that I'm onto my 8th novel, and I've been at it 20 years, and I've been into the regenerative ag space for a decade now. So, but I've always had that notion of landscape first, then people. So that's my rather long-winded explanation,
No, that's wonderful. So Nicole, it's really in terms of the books that the book that you just wrote, and you know, the deep storytelling. And I think the thing that I love when I read your book is they weren't like case studies of scientific information. It was actually it was all about storytelling, which is what Rachael does so beautifully. And I think that you really did that so beautifully in what you wrote.
Yeah, some people say I write like it's a conversation, and I think it was part of it. Like, imagine you're just sitting around the table and you want to express something that's digestible. So when the publisher said, no, we need it to be more technical, I was thinking, well, I have lots of those technical books and they're fantastic, but I've never sat down and read any of them from start to finish. And I'm sure they're really valuable, but I wanted people to read it. Like, I wanted people to get engaged and get heart connected. And I know Rachel's with me on this. It's the heart that really transforms outcomes. It's the heart that really connects people. And if we're just reading data and facts and figures and financial stuff, that doesn't shift anything, and it's never shifted anything. And so I actually changed the title of the book as well. I'm going to do the gratuitous hold the book up, inspired by. But is that it was originally going to be called The Regenerators, and it just sounded really hard and really like technical, and that's why I called it For the Love of Soil, because it is about love. And I think it's still I'm still like, I totally geek out and I love all the technical stuff and I love all the intricacies and the complexity of soil, but it's no good holding on to some kind of knowledge if you're not able to share that. And so that was a big part, is how do we make the complex digestible, so that even if you've got a home garden or you've got 300,000 acres, you can still start to shift how you see and interact with land.
Yeah. So in your, you had quite a few sort of stories that you wanted to share. What was your rock star, really great one that really stood out for you while you were writing the book?
Oh,
That's really hard for me to pick my favorite child. I think some of it is actually continued to be unfolded. And so hearing from people that are in the book since it was published, and then what's actually happened then. And so I have a case study in here that I call it was the best of times and the worst of times. That whole twain. And these soils were side by side, and they are the best and the worst soils I've ever seen in my life. And hearing now actually how they have started to understand their soil, so they managed to get a cover crop established. They're using some vermicast, using some of the principles, and for the first time in about 30 years there's something really growing on that land. And so just hearing that joy, I find a lot with the regenerative, when you're working with people, they might come to me because they're interested in maybe the lifting yield or improving soil health. And as we start to work together, how that really shifts and starts people realizing how this soil, it interacts with every aspect of life, and how you interact with your family. And I think some of the stories in here was interviewing people's children, and children talking about, like, there was a time before regenerative agriculture and a time after, and how mum and dad are less stressed they get really excited and passionate about stuff. I feel passionate about being involved in agriculture. So I think for me, that was some of the big stuff, was hearing from young people and maybe asking questions I wouldn't have normally asked, like sitting down with a 10-year-old and going, yeah, so tell me about your experience. And I might not have done that otherwise.
Yeah,
so I'm fascinated, guys. Like, who were you both at 10 years old? Going back to that little girl who was a 10-year-old, how did you get from your 10-year-old to who you are today? What was that path you both traveled?
Nicole first. Oh, me. Well, thanks, Nicole. Well,
I'm so well behaved.
10 years old, yeah, I was one of those kids with the seat out of their pants and the knees worn out in their jeans. I was just always in the dirt. We were made to work in the veggie garden, the family veggie garden. It was huge, and I was so at 10 years of age, I'm putting cut up sheep into a beer carton for my dad in the meat shed to cart back to mum, and I just knew I didn't want to walk this 9-to-5 line. I didn't believe what the systems were saying. Even at 10, I just thought, no, girls shouldn't have to do that. Girls can do everything. And so I think I've carried that through, and I've never wanted to bow down to any kind of system. I've just wanted to wake up with the sun, go to bed with the moon in my face, and just lead a life where advertising doesn't influence me. And so very independent soul, but also deep connection with soil. And as Nicole says, it's connected to everything. So from that animal loving child, I now have a regenerative farm that has a flurge, like the flock and the herd, and we have the matriarchal system where we leave our old cow in and she teaches the young ones. We leave the older ewes in. So it's a family group. And so I run the household in the same way, where everybody cooks together, we grow our food together. So but along the way, adding on to what Nicole said, I've found it really, and if you could beep it out, Biggie, our producer guy who's running this, it's been so difficult as a woman in my culture, because I was raised to be less. I was raised to not have a voice. I was raised to put up and shut up. And when you're spraying glyphosate around your kids, you just have to sort of swallow that. And it just... so I think that 10-year-old child, there's been a huge gap of growth in that, from being really fearful to having to wake up and know that as a sisterhood, collectively, we really need to be brave. And that's sort of really where I'm standing today. And now I'm studying, and I will get to you. I love Nicole's story that I've read in her book, but...
very good product placement.
All the notes in there, because I'm weaving this into my 8th novel, which is about the milking industry. So this is how this ripple effect goes on. But in terms, I'm now studying a Bachelor of Science in regenerative agriculture, because that rural romance novelist tag kind of drags everything down a notch, and I want to be able to say, I'm studying the science. I have been a heart person and a womb person, Kath and Kim, feel it in your waters. I've always felt my feminine depth. So I'm bringing the science into it, and I know that there's only the university we have in Tasmania, they only gave one lecture on soil biology. It's all on chemistry. So we are blessed to have Southern Cross University on the mainland, online studying agroecology, alternative farming systems, and there's this buzz there. So I've come from that 10-year-old child with my face in the soil, and I still want my face in the soil. It's the smell of life, which I think is a Nicole quote. There you go.
Yeah.
So
the elixir of life.
Yeah, so I'm just one lit up, passionate person, because it's about our future generations. Without sounding cliched, Yeah. So yeah. Over to Nicole.
I didn't have the privilege of growing up on a farm. I'm a Air Force brat, so I grew up on Air Force bases. But, you know, New Zealand in the 70s and 80s was very rural. And so we always had farm ground around us, and, you know, uncles and grandparents that were involved in agriculture. And at 10 years of age, we actually brought just like a small block. And it was around that time that the New Zealand went into a recession and interest rates went through the roof. And so my father had brought this little farm that was kind of his dream, and suddenly found that his mortgage payments were more than what his wages were. And I hadn't really realized this as a child. Like, he really actually protected us. I only found out recently, like, he'd go to work because he was working for Air New Zealand. Like, it was his first year at Air New Zealand, and he was eating the biscuits on the plane because we couldn't afford any food. So, and I remember us killing pigs too young because we needed food, and just the horror of going to the abattoir and taking these pigs in. And because he was in such a financial strife, we actually moved to Hong Kong. He took a job with Cathay Pacific, and that became such an influencing time of my life. So I always wanted not to have animals. I actually wanted to be an animal. Like, I spent half my life wanting to be a horse. But, you know, just feeling really connected to animals and really related. Like, it's hard to find a photograph of me as a young person without an animal. Doesn't matter where I was. Animals would be, you know, attracted to me, which was really cool. But being in Hong Kong, you're kind of, it's very green. It's different from how people imagine it. Like, the city's only a part of it, and we always lived near the water or in the bush. But my realization was that people will live in their own filth. They will live with smog and air that you can't breathe, and like black stuff all over your vehicles and plastic bags everywhere and just garbage. And it's not enough necessarily to interrupt a behavior. And so for me, it was a real shaping in terms of the world is going to continue to eat itself like it is unless people are really willing to stand up and be a stand for, actually, this is how I'm going to live my life. And this is, you know, nature actually is the most important aspect, not money or anything else that's going on in life. So it was for me like a real kind of like, get up and speak your truth. Don't kind of just sit and think, oh, people will stop doing this. People won't, you know, live in their own filth. Well, of course they will. So yeah, I've always felt very connected to nature, and I think my family always knew that I would be involved in farming in some way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, my childhood memories of, I actually was raised as a young child in New Hebrides, which became Vanuatu. So I was an islander child. And I think that just was such formative years for me, because basically I'd run out on the beach in the afternoon, and we'd sing all the time, the beautiful islander culture of Vanuatu. And, you know, and we'd go to the markets, and it was full of women, and it was the women that actually basically managed the whole social structure of, you know, the community. And it was so formative for me, because I realized, and also the backdrop of the resistance and the rebellion. And I think that just brought out, I know I was young, but it was brought out that rebellion of like speaking out, and my cultural, like that deep cultural knowledge that I didn't really know about, but it became part of me as a child. I now come into, like, now in my late 40s, just about to turn 50, and I think about, you know, just even in our area right now with our Indigenous communities who have been, you know, we just don't have that community there. And I think about, you know, when crops get sprayed, like the neighbours, I can hear the planes, and I think, oh my gosh, imagine, I feel like I can't say anything. I can't go to the neighbour and say, I don't want you to spray anymore. I don't want you to spray into the rivers next to me. And if our Indigenous community was there, it was like I could get that community and they could be the voice really easily, because they know how to do it so easily. And so how do we use our voices through our culture and unite our voices together? It's really something that is, you know, right now, and particularly with all of the cultural genocide that's happening, I'm feeling like our next sort of us uniting with our Indigenous is going to be really key in this regen ag chemical, you know, space, definitely. Yeah, sorry, we got
original people.
Yeah.
Well, I actually I came here from my spiritual background, so I actually found Regen Ag and the soil and my farm like pursuing goodly, godly work, really. So, I mean, I used to be a Buddhist nun for 5 years. That's what I did when I was in my 20s, and eventually found myself wanting to be deeply in service to what would be the most regenerative genre that we could work in to really like provide some skill base. And so I've come in from the artistic and spiritual background, definitely not a farming background. I grew up in between the Gold Coast and St. Ives in Cornwall in the UK. So a really different, like pirate, very beachy, very piratey, and have ended up out in the outback, deserted, droughted, right next to Helen and Mike's farm. So, but I mean, ultimately, there's so many amazing people right now on planet Earth, clusters of us everywhere in every country who are being drawn together to establish platforms and to tell these stories. And ultimately, you know, we put together the Carbonate smart boxes, which is, you know, it seems a bit antiquated in this world of high-tech internet communications, and yet we still find returning to the book, returning to that very tangible story that we can hold in our hands, to that book, has done more in our work towards connecting farmers to the REGENER8 space than anything else we could have possibly done. And I've just received a comment that says, this is for you, Nicole, from one of our speakers, one of our listeners. I managed to get my dad to take your book, Nicole, in brackets. You know how big that was in itself, and he's read it, loved it, and think he's finally might get me. He finally understands where I'm coming from. So that is
healing relationships.
Yeah, I mean, we can't underestimate
really nice. No, and I think to speak into that and your comment, Helen, about the neighbours spraying the waterways is that we're not coming from the wrong making. I think it's just coming from creating a space where people feel like they can actually start to speak up and really starting to see that how much of the land management, that regenerative, that Indigenous cultures hold on to. I think of some of the most beautiful soils I've ever seen, and they were historically in New Zealand, some of the original Māori gardens, like some of the most, you know, productive, prolific gardens, and the European colonization mindset came in and said, oh, no, we have to do it like England, and we're just going to wipe that slate clean. And those soils are still sitting there, and absolutely just 22% organic matter, if you guys can imagine that, like these just divine soils. And I think this is the time for Indigenous people to really be speaking up and standing up, because we want to understand how is it that you read land, what is some of that elder wisdom. And I've been speaking to some Lakota people, and they were saying that they feel like that wisdom's lost. And I actually don't think that's true. I think that it's in our DNA. I think that it takes just being on land and sinking ourselves into it, that knowledge comes through, and that, I don't know, I believe the land is speaking, and speaking fairly loudly.
Yeah, I agree, Nicole. I know that if I get a cold, rainy day on the land, I take my shoes and socks off and I'll walk around. Like, I will literally connect to it, because we you know, you can earth yourself to the magnetics of it, and it's so important. And I will actually lie on our land. If I'm having, you know, if we pull up for lunch, you just lie down on Mother Earth, and what is meant to be this living universe beneath me has been absolutely brutalised since white man's occupation of Tasmania over the past, it would have been farmed for over 150 years, the ground that we're on. But I think you cannot make other people wrong in this. We have sprayers going past our house all the time. When I'm putting the washing on the line, I can smell the spray. I've got horrible, I mean, we've all got the spray stories, but I think the land will speak for itself. And I just noticed we will graze our animals behind white tape and move them each day. Our neighbour has been watching for 3 years, wondering why he doesn't have pasture and ours is lush. The other day I saw he's got the electric fence, and he's now grazing his cows in a similar way. Well, I've not had to say, I haven't had to say anything, but the land has expressed itself. And we've got a very prominent farm where people drive past. Our neighbours adopted pain relief at land marking because they've witnessed the pain relief. It's a thing called numb nuts, which you give to inject to lamb at lamb marking time, because we're all about ethics for our beautiful animals. They're like our family to us. And so by adopting this pain relief at numbnuts, now the neighbour's doing it, and then they're now following regenerative ag. I bought 6 of Nicole's books and I've handed them out, you know, to the cousins that won't change, but I don't need to say anything. They just need to come and see our pasture when it's under, you know, duress with dry times. Our land will tell them what, you know, what we're doing. And we're not spending any money. That's the other thing. These guys are spending a fortune on the multinational stuff. I'm an author, like Nicole says, you don't make money being an author. So we don't have money for glyphosate and all the crap, thank God. Not that we would use it anyway, but if you need to reach people and you need to reach them on that economic mindset, which is something I can't prescribe to, but if you need to reach them, you can reach them on the economics and say, well, we've spent nothing and yet we're getting a 10% premium because our food is chem-free. So there's that way of changing pathways in people's in between here.
Yeah, Nicole, I'd like to hear from you.
Well, I was just thinking of that very thing of like so I was living in a very conventional sheep and beef area where the men, if they spoke to me, which probably wasn't at all, they would speak to my husband. And there was never any eye contact. Like I obviously just scared the Jiminy crickets out of them. It's fine. But, you know, they'd say, oh, where's your husband? And I'd be like, he's down the bottom of the farm and I'll walk you down. And I wouldn't say anything. You know, we're in the middle of a drought and we still had probably mid-calf clover. We still had a green base, even though all the neighbors were down to the dust. And I didn't need to say anything. You know, you just walk them through that. And it is that they can feel it. They can see it. They can, like, the sponginess under their feet. And it was the biggest compliment when one of them said, everyone's talking about you at the pub. And I'm like, that is fantastic. You know, if people feel the confidence to ask questions at the pub of each other and say, have you seen what's going on over there? That's how we plant those seeds. And if I'd said to any of my ex-husband's friends, you know, that what they were doing was wrong, things wouldn't have gone well. So it was very much like people can't deny what they're seeing with their eyes, and certainly know that, you know, again, you're not spending a huge fortune on rehabilitating landscapes.
Yeah, so Nicole, I'm really and you know, I think that people listening right now, and please ask questions, anyone. If you ask questions and we can answer them live, we'd love to hear from you. I'm really interested. So if there's a farmer that's watching and they've just been starting to ignite their interest in this space, what would be the next steps for them? What would you say to them?
I guess it depends if we're talking about like livestock farmers or cropping, or, you know, like I think the very high value crops that are currently on really high inputs, you know, if you are in that situation, then I think it was Arden Anderson that first said it, Dr. Arden Anderson, who's an American agronomist. He said, if you're walking through a minefield, follow in the footsteps of the person in front of you. And probably with a good 20 meters distance, I would say. But, you know, I think finding people in your local community that are experienced, talk to farmers, really build up your knowledge and understanding before you try and shift things too quickly, especially with high value crops. I think with grazing and livestock, you've probably got a little bit more wiggle room because potentially you're not using, you know, high inputs anyway, and you know, go to grazing schools and, you know, really arm yourself with knowledge. Like regenerative agriculture is very much about the knowledge base. And I think conventional, whatever that means, has really undermined people's art and creativity and thinking and listening to the intuition. But it's very, you know, it's very knowledge intensive. And I think we have sort of been trained to be lazy. You know, here's the calendar spray, here's the chemical for this, here's when you spray this. And that's one thing that people say to me is like, that joy has come back in their life, and that you are part of something that's creative instead of like, oh, get in the tractor, what am I going to kill today? So I think really reaching out, there's amazing networks now in Australia and New Zealand, like especially, you know, on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter, but I hear Twitter's got some pretty good stuff. There's a WhatsApp group in New Zealand, and I don't know how many hundred of people are on it now. but it's farmers sharing photographs. It's farmers talking about, this is my seed mix, or this is my grazing management. What do you think of this? Have I gone in too early? Have I gone in too late? Check out my cow. What do you think? And it's just incredibly kinesthetic. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing is this COVID has brought forth, actually, we can communicate in this kind of way, and we can actually go out in the field, and I can share photos with you, and we can really talk about what is possible, because it's confidence that's the main, I think, limitation for people to step into this, is just not being quite sure of where to start. And there is no prescription. I don't have the answer. Oh, yeah, you just start this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you're talking about COVID and that concept of those high-end crops of what we call monoculture crops. So, we've grown our own barley. We've grown barley this year, and we actually do monoculture crops on our place. But we also use, we have a totally different regime to a conventional regime, and it's really fascinating because Mike has just gone and harvested out at Moree, where their yields have been really high, really, really high, but you can see the soil, the soil is being mined, and, we come back here where our yields are a bit lower, but the costs involved are so much lower. So we're actually in front, because we're not mining the soil, we're actually putting carbon, so we're putting in our multi-species between seasons. That monoculture of socially distanced
socially distanced plants.
Socially distanced plants compared to the multi-species and the biodiversity and all the incredible benefits that has. It's really quite amazing. And even now we've decided that when the barley crop, as soon as the barley crop comes off, we're going to put our 18 species, direct drill straight in. And the other really cool thing that we're doing is I bought some honey and butterfly mix from meadow flowers. So these are just flower seeds, and I'm going to go and put that into, we're going to do a bit of an experiment and add those. So, Rachel, I think you're doing something similar, are you?
Oh, yeah, that's after we get off this call. We found it really hard to source seed. Now, a seed, as if you've watched the documentary, you'll know that it's owned by the multinationals. Most of it is coated in Nicole will know the terminology, but I call it
neonicotinoids.
Yeah, neonicotinoids. I get the knickers in a knot over the neonicotinoids. So we're trying to find naked seed, because we love naked seed, but we'll be inoculating our seed in Nutrisoil, which is like a vermicast kind of mix, and so we'll inoculate the seed, and then we've got this, I call it the how you going seed drill, which was made up of bits of machinery from clearing sales, and it's cost us less than $500, and it's a doozy of a machine, and we're going to be putting in at least 20 species, and some of it we're looking at, like Gabe Brown, the American guy that you saw in Kiss the Ground. So we'll be putting in flowers and vegetables as well, because we live near a population centre that would welcome chemical-free food. So it's really exciting, and we talk about social distancing. And Nicole will know this better, but I'm in love with the fact that all the science that's coming out on quorum sensing and quorum signalling, where the plants are talking to the fungi, which is talking to the bacteria. It's so exciting, and so I've always known soil is sexy. I was a truffle harvester for 7 years, so I'd go along with a dog, and I got paid to jam my face in the ground, and I mean, the dog would just, people think the dogs dig up the truffles, but it's our job to dig up the truffles. So I kind of, you could see in those truffle systems where they'd sprayed it out versus the ones that they hadn't sprayed out, and there was so much social distancing going on in the trufferys that were using sprays. So yes, the more the merrier in nature. It's, so that's why I'm so pumped to be in regen farming, because after I get off this call, I get to play with worm poo, naked seed, and we get to go and drill soil that is capped and devastated. But I have this book that tells me why we're getting dandelions, because you have to tell me why we're getting the dandelions, because it's the, you know, the phosphorus. It's the phosphorus, isn't it, Nicole? I can't remember. I've underlined it.
High potassium. High potassium.
High potassium.
Low phosphorus.
So with our 22 species, we don't need to remedy it savagely. We can just use Mother Nature to fix what the legacy that we've taken on in the last. We've had the farm 3 years, and the soil is buggered, and I mean totally lifeless, and it's taken us 3 years to find an earthworm, but now every plant, every shovel hole, there's worms in it. So yeah, so this multi-species stuff is the next step of rehabilitating this land. So
there's a really great Facebook page called the Regenerative Agriculture Group that a lot of us are already on, for those who don't know. But I remember seeing one really great post to say, look, if you don't have any money to buy the multi-species seeds, because they are quite expensive, just go and buy your bird seed and just see what will germinate, and just try that. Like, it was such a cool, it was really wonderful. So you just can be
DIY.
Yeah, so this is what's amazing about our regen community. Like, it's just, we're all talking with each other, we're sharing our problems, and the thing is that we need to have the problems there to work out. You know, it's good to come across a problem, because then we're all talking together to work what the solution is. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know, Helen, coming into this space as an artist, like, what's so obvious to me is that the truth is beautiful. Like, when you're doing something that's good, it actually is beautiful. And one thing that's just so profoundly obvious in the Regen Ag space is that everything about it is beautiful. Like, the end result of healing our soil is beautiful. The life that it brings is beautiful. The multi-species seeding is beautiful. It actually, all up, Regen Ag is a work of art. And I love that about it. And you can smell it, you can feel it, you can taste it, you can touch it. It is our eyes don't lie. When it comes to looking at what is good and true, it always looks beautiful. And, you know, the Regen Ag space to me is just my most obvious marker. You know, you can't deny the fact, like, everyone can compare the results and you will see beauty and goodness and life in our space within regeneration. And that is true across the board on all topics, not just the soil. When you're looking at regeneration, if it's good and true, it'll always look beautiful.
We should start singing a song. La la.
No, we should.
Yeah, we need a Regen Ag soundtrack. It's true. That's our next job. Regen Ag soundtrack.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, Rachel was talking about, like, her target audience originally for the books, and I guess perhaps that might be changing. But, you know, a lot of my driver is, how do we get chemicals out of the entire food system? How do we stop swimming in this chemical soup? And so who I need to be speaking to about that is the conventional farmers. I mean, and trying not to call the conventional farmers, but, you know, large scale, broadacre, high input producers are the ones that we need to be communicating with. And so I think I'm more thoughtful in terms of how do we kind of communicate some of these in terms of the storytelling, or in terms of the metaphors, I guess. And if you look at who's really managing most of the large scale operations in the world, unfortunately, it is white men. You know, 99% of farmers right now are, the main manager is white men. And I think that has its challenges in itself. But I think by opening up the possibility of regenerating landscapes and really reconnecting to landscapes, it's changing how they operate with their families, how they're operating with the communities, and bringing life back into communities, and, you know, having those conversations about diversity. But it's almost like I'm really careful, like, it's a step-by-step kind of progression in terms of how do we open the doors. And I do think, like, there are books that you read that crack open that doorway that you can't shut. I mean, once we can get people through the door, like, hopefully Sarah's dad, it's very hard to shut that door behind us. And so I'm very conscious of that storytelling, really, which I guess is where I come about not making things wrong. And watching the Kiss the Ground movie, which I really enjoyed, I actually watched it with a couple of ranchers, and they really felt like it was making all of agriculture wrong, and for them that like they didn't engage with the movie at all, really. And I was quite disappointed about that, because I'm like, who is it that we are wanting to engage with? And maybe it's consumers, and we allow the consumers to drive the demand for regenerative agriculture or clean products. And so we don't necessarily need to worry about whether or not a farmer's interested. They might join in because they get another 6 cents or a kilo or whatever it is. Like, there might be premiums that'll do it, but we don't have the premiums right now. And I really feel like there is a driver to engaging with communities.
Yeah, Nicole, I think that all of those things are needed, like all aspects of our foodies and our farmers. It is all, like, everyone has a part to play in this space. And I think also women, the wives of these white men have a huge part to play. And in fact, I think that the regen ag space is being driven by women so much. Like, I think my personal experience, and I'm really lucky to have Mike as my husband, who has been in the space for so long, but I remember, back when we were still using chemical when my kids were little, and, Mike would say, well, we've got to spray the paddock, and I'd be like, I'm getting my kids out of here, we're going into town, this is, just feeling, because, I've always fed them organic food. And then it was like the conversation, well, if I'm taking my kids away to town and we're spraying food, what does that say about, so, that whole conversation is like, so as the mum who cares for their kids, that's actually sometimes the first, as well as the books, as well as the mentoring, very powerful, I think, in this space.
Yeah, and I
think that's so true.
Yeah, I know the last major event I did was International Women's Day in the Berrigan Shire, and there was about 200 women there. And after I spoke, I had young women who clearly had young children. They would come up to me and hug me and sob, because they could not get the white men in their lives to change their practices. And double with that, there'd been a drought, then there'd been high rainfall, and you could literally smell this anaerobic soil rotting around us. The landscape was decimated. The women were exhausted. They weren't getting heard. And right before I jumped in a car, another older woman came up and said, Rachel, what you are advocating is very dangerous. How are we meant to feed the world if they're going to stop farmers spraying? And so consequently, people are being run on misinformation, agribusiness, and also fear. And the other thing about it is, we think we're privileged white women, but we've actually been silenced all our lives without our awareness. And look, to go onto a bit of my backstory, when my divorce was imminent, I had four and a 6-year-old kids that I had to get out of that situation. My father opted to keep my ex-husband on the farm. So my childhood farm, I had to leave that farm and take my children and leave the men with the land, because the men owned the land. Even if it was my ex-husband, he needed a strong male around. So that's my personal journey. And I empathise with the women who are listening to this, who want desperately to change. Some people you cannot change. You can only change yourself within. And once that happens, the other opportunities open up to you. And fortunately, 10 years down the track, I'm like you, Helen, I've found a bloke who's balanced in his masculine energy and his feminine energy, and he gets Mother Nature. For example, my kids will go home to the original farm and the animals will run to the far end of the paddock. When they're at our place, the animals are just drawn to us. So my kids are getting the best of both views of how we can manage land. And so everything is a blessing. Everything is a blessing. And to bring these guys along that are addicted to their chemicals, we may not be able to do that. But if we can grow the people that are willing to change, then that's how we get the momentum. Yeah. So I just thought I'd say that, because, we think we're being heard as women, but we're not. We're not. Some
I do feel like, doing presentations around some of these big cropping areas that are facing multiple threats from climate, from insects, from increasing costs, from flooding, from frost. I mean, you name it. They lost 1 million acres of crop in Iowa, I think, from wind end of this last season. You know, like there's so much pressures going on that I feel like it's a perfect time to be having these conversations, because people are starting to go, this is not sustainable. Guys that are like, we can't keep up with the stress, you know, certainly, I mean, I'm not saying that women aren't in the tractors as well. I mean, really feeling like you're on this spinning wheel, a little mouse that's running and you're not getting anywhere. And so I'm finding a rural community that seems to be increasingly open. And I wonder too if it is because I'm a woman and that I'm a New Zealander that's now working predominantly in the States, or I'm a New Zealander that's working in Australia, and it seems to be people are more responsive because I'm an outsider. And I think too, I just don't believe, like it's very rarely that I come up against that male dominated not listening to me anymore. Like that was like 10 years ago, and I feel like that's just not something that shows up in my world anymore. And occasionally it does, and then I'm so shocked. I'm like, oh, I forgot that was out there. Because it just seems to be that there's more and more people that are incredibly progressive and starting to become educated, and we're seeing more stuff in the rural media, more stuff at a policy level. I see the Vancouver, they're talking about a $500 million Centre for Regenerative Agriculture. It looks like they've got funding to open that up. You know, there's big stuff happening globally, and I think if we keep ourselves in the mindset of yesterday, that there's all these restrictions and that we can't speak up, we're not actually living into what's happening right now, which is this is being discussed in the big rural papers. Like it blows my mind. I'll read like a conventional feedlot magazine talking about cover crops. It's like, oh, well, fantastic. You know, like the conversations are shifting so fast, and I think it's up to us to be nimble and adaptive like our soils need to be. Oh, I wanted to ask the question of like, do you know where that Feed the World thing came from? Do you know where that originally started?
No.
So the first time it was recorded is in 1750s in England of the colonials wanting to go and I think they must have been coming to the US, and they needed to feed the world, which really was just, you know, feed England. But it's been this driving thing to like, we need to be like, you know, all the colonial countries like Australia and New Zealand and the US were set up to feed Mother England. And we really need to shift that course, because it's actually BS, and countries can feed themselves. And, you know, it's 87%, don't they say, of like the world is actually fed by small scale production anyway, which is mainly managed by women. You know, that's really what is that feeds the world. It's not the great big broadacre monocultures that are feeding cows. That's not feeding the world. So, yeah, I have very little tolerance for that feed the world thing. I'm like, yeah, actually, I think we need to be thinking smarter than that. There's more than enough food. Stop wasting it.
Yeah. I think I've had a similar thing with the new novel, is that because of COVID with Tassie, we're an island, and that's a blessing, but it's, you know, it's made everyone so much more aware that we really need this local food production. And I know we've got corporate lettuce farmers over our fence from us, and you know, you have to acknowledge the stress they're under. I mean, the stories that the managers had of working in South Africa, where they've shipped lettuce to Harrods in England from South Africa via somewhere else because an airport shut down. Like the food miles, the systems he was telling us. So rather than say you're a corporate farmer, you're bad, we've befriended this guy. We're on such a human level, and he knows he needs to change, but he's got a board to answer to, and like a CEO, all down to, you know, the finances. And when you look at what goes into that lettuce production system that kills everything from frogs to mice to lizards to keeping birds, everything, you wouldn't eat bagged lettuce, let alone the bromides or whatever you put in it. So we grow our own. But yeah, I think it's such a huge problem, but you can't get caught up in the problems. You just have to shine a light forward. And, you know, that's what my novels aim to do, with painting a landscape that they can feel in their hearts, and then, you know that that's actually possible. And more we're seeing it, you know, on people's land. The Hegarties in Western Australia, I know you describe them so beautifully in your book, how Di loves a hug. I'm a huggy woman.
A professional hugger. She's a professional hugger. Yeah. Yeah.
So in, you know,
Oh my
salt-affected sandy soil in Western Australia, you're creating a paradise, and that's what the White Horses, my latest novel, which like you with your book, Nicole, the publicity nosedived on that. But you know, that to be able to see that, I was able to put it into a novel and then spread it. You know, ideas of viruses they're good. You know, they can be good or bad. So it's choosing which thoughts we send out into the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really amazing. I think Mike and I, as you know, as long as we've been married, we'd sit on our veranda and talk about our place being heaven on earth. You know, and that knowing that our place is heaven on earth, and seeing the drought come by and that terrible brown landscape that was so devastating on so many levels, and then having the rain and the green and the trees and all the trees, those trees that I thought had died, they're all now got this stunning green leaves that I've never seen and noticed before, you know, and it's just so rewarding. It's actually, there's something in going through the terrible drought and coming out the other end and really, really deeply being grateful for, you know, the work that, all that hard work that we've done in our cover crops and the work and getting carbon in our soil and all of that. Like, I went walking last week and went across we've got this amazing 22 species crops. It's looking a bit, you know, sad because it's been there for nearly 8 months now. But there were birds that like so many species of birds that I had never really seen. Like, we've got lots of cockatoos and galahs here, but beautiful finches. And so that is so rewarding. And it's so beautiful to see, you know, the kids being outside, seeing all these birds. And so, yeah, that putting a picture out, even though you don't have it right now, is very powerful, Rachel. I really agree with you.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like consciousness has shifted. Like, regardless of like world events or politics, whatever's happening in this day, like, actually the consciousness of the human being, the awareness has shifted. We have evolved something has grown within us. It feels very obvious to me. So now we've got a lot of human beings from all across the world, all variations of life, particularly women, because from a spiritual side, the rise of the divine feminine is upon us. That is part of the consciousness shift. And with that is the receptor, the Mother Earth. The Mother Earth has come back to the consciousness. So even if you're not attuned to it with your own awareness, it's sort of affecting the whole world right now. And I really believe we're about to go into a massive insurgence of regeneration across the planet. Like, I have a lot of hope that in the next couple of years, regardless of what's going on externally, there is enough of an inward shift that we inwardly desire beauty and good nutritional food and health. All those things we desire for our families, for our children, have really sort of risen strongly. So I truly believe we're going to see regeneration like never, ever before. And in a couple of years, we're going to be looking at a whole new earth. Like, and the earth's ability to regenerate is one of our catchphrases here, has been vastly underestimated. And I have a lot of hope in that. And I think we're right on the cusp of that. And the rising of the feminine voice, she's here, baby. Like, we're about to see a whole new surgence of rock star female farmers and female educators, female speakers, writers, artists, poets, you name it. And it's going to be a beautiful new world.
We've just had Simon. Simon, thank you for your comment a little while ago saying, wow, great to hear your stories about women driving change. Thank you. So it's nice to hear that you know, the men are also, our men are pivotal as well. We need to do this together. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about unification.
For me, it's like not being like that knee-jerk reaction too. Like, I think things have been, it's not male dominated, but masculine dominated in terms of energy. And I think some men hear this idea of feminine and think, oh, but I'm a man. And it actually creates an emotional reaction in them that's not good. Like, they can be reactive towards that word feminine. And I think it's important to go, well, actually, it's an internal energy. Like, men need to embrace that feminine side in themselves. And I think that is being kind to animals, that is being loving with your family or loving with land or you know, just reconnecting in a different way. And I think it's really important when we're thinking about regeneration that we aren't saying, and not that, because I often think of it like you could have, you know, oil or killing whales on one side and Greenpeace on the other, and it's not a shift in thinking. Like it's a like, no, you can't do that. And what we need to be doing is transformative, which is an emergent, which isn't, I'm not going to be doing that. It's not some kind of anti thing, because then we start to build unintended consequences. Then we have all sorts of other implications. Whereas if we're coming from transformation, we're not going to have to clean up a mess that we're going to have to apologize for later, which is often my concern.
Yes.
But I wanted to announce that New Zealand Merino has just announced a regenerative merino label. And when they did that in New Zealand, over half of the New Zealand merino farmers signed up for the certification. And we're talking about the high country of New Zealand actually signing up to, and it's an outcome verified certificate. So they're looking at what are the outcomes in terms of soil carbon, water movement, rooting depths, resilience, all of that. And so we are seeing initiatives like that all across the world right now, and it is incredibly exciting.
That's wonderful news, Nicole. And in fact, Carbonate's actually been working with some amazing groups to look at a certification around regen. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So outcome-based?
Yeah, outcomes-based, five outcomes. So water cycle, nutrient density, chemical residues, and two others, which is escaping me right now. But yes, outcomes-based.
And how are you going to measure the nutrient density?
Yeah, so we've actually got a meter. Kel, did you want to share our little
Yeah, I love this
plan?
story. This is my favorite story. So we've partnered, we've been working with a guy called Dan Kittred, and last year we introduced him with the National Regen Ag Day. So his bionutrient meter, all that tech he's been innovating, has just been such a fantastic insight. And do you know about it, Rachel? So you've heard of it, Nicole? Like, it's definitely been an awesome piece of tech.
No, it's the funniest thing. I was talking to him this morning. Synchronicity.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
So we're the co-founders of the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, Farmers and Foodies Hijacking Valentine's Day. And one of the things that we're planning to do is called vegetable disclosure. So
yeah, my favorite word. I love it. Because Rachel, one of the things that this beautiful innovation actually does is it gives you a live reading of the nutritional attributes of a piece of food. So, you know, with the concept that you could go into the supermarket and have X-ray vision as the consumer and be able to like actually put it on a carrot or put it on an orange or whatever and actually get a live, totally true reading of the nutritional attributes of that piece. So in some of his experiments, like they were literally taking a carrot from like a Woolworths type store and a carrot from a community garden and testing it. And the difference in nutrient density was up to 20,000%, which is literally like you would have to eat 200 carrots to match the one from the community garden. So it's a really extraordinary concept. And like as far as blasting awareness and really making one of those you know, real life-changing sort of documentaries or books was to actually like do an actual vegetable disclosure about where our food chain is at here in Australia, like what it actually looks like as compared, you know, using the language of nutrients. So if you're getting the labels, but
yeah, to do a plug for the National Regen Ag Day, anyone out there that would like to put an event on, a kitchen table conversation, a field day, a book launch. Yes, Rachel, absolutely.
Yes, Rachel.
Or want to be involved with vegetable disclosure.
That's so exciting. I've got in the my next novel, my main character Connie Mulligan's quite an eccentric young lady, and she's always going out to dinner and telling all the diners what chemicals are exactly in their cauliflower or how they spray things on carrots to make them straight, and it causes early onset childhood arthritis. So she's a real killjoy to go out to dinner with. So I'm sort of using humour, and I had heard of this tech that's coming, and it's sort of like that. I get excited. I want to go out in the paddock and do that. I mean, I know you've got the Brixometer, which measures the sugars, but I want to do that to ensure that our our animals are getting the nutrient density, and that when we say our meat is regen, we know that it actually is, because it's all very well to say we haven't used chemicals and this is better, but to actually know it with the data, that's super gold.
X-ray vision.
Yeah,
that's
wonderful.
Like farmers' superhero qualities.
What a nice way to end off, hey? Super quality farmers, superhuman.
Yeah.
Superhuman.
Well, Helen, can I ask?
But what I love about the outcome stuff is that it's harder to cheat. You know, you have all these certifications that are based on practice, whereas if we're really looking at nutrient density or ecosystem services or, you know, biodiversity, all that's exciting, and it really is much more heart fulfilling. And because I think consumers just don't trust the labels anymore. Like, you try and buy meat or eggs in America, it is so misleading. Like, the packaging makes it sound like you've got something strange and you get it home and you Google it, and no, they're in crates. They've just managed to find a way to frame it. And I think people no longer trust it. Whereas, one, you could certify it, but two, you have your little ray gun and you're actually, I mean, it's probably another 3 to 5 years away realistically, but actually be able to have that, and then you can make those decisions. Like, I used to think we shouldn't be certifying what you haven't done, but certify what you have done. Like, this has had herbicides and 10 pesticides, and they put it on the label. You very quickly will choose what you want and you don't want. So I'm excited to see like technology actually getting in behind Regen Ag and really putting people's you know, putting their word out there that this is actually what they're doing. Yeah.
Well, the solutions are definitely becoming available, and as we and the resources. So we're going to see some amazing innovations in this space. Like, in the next 24 months will be spot on. I was actually, because what you were saying before, Nicole, about balance and integration, and sort of like not about rejecting the old, but it's about unifying the two perspectives and finding like the ultimate solution there, unification. And I was actually chewing on the words climate change the other day. And what struck me was this number 8. So we have 8 in carbonate, because to us 8 was the level, getting farmers' soil up to 8% carbon was like the level of sustainability. And after that, the farms could start to thrive. But it was the 8%.
I just saw it as infinity. It's not the infinity sign.
So the number 8 does represent an infinity. And if you turn it on its side, it's got that beautiful, perfect balance, symmetry between the old and the new and those cycles. And if you look at the word climate change, we're literally looking at the internal climate infinity sign changing within us. And that's what I think has happened. I think that's what I will put down the shift in consciousness to. We have started to live the eternal figure of 8, the eternal infinity, perfectly balanced, symmetry, all working together as one integrated unit. Nothing left behind, nothing excluded. Everything improved and perfected to be working at the best it can be working. So that is my new take on climate change. It's an internal journey, and it's us that has to make that shift, because our consciousness is what projects it into reality externally.
Beautiful. And Nikala's just written in. Thank you, Nikala. I've loved this united conversation. Thank you, beautiful women. Thank you. So thank you, Rachael.
That's
amazing.
A pleasure. I just, you know, just to think, this is the research that I'm doing for my next time. So raising the unsung power of the vagina, that is the portal to all life. And there's beautiful photos of ancient goddesses doing the Sheila and the gig, like, show us your portal, love.
Yeah,
show us your portal.
It's, well, you know, it's probably too local a joke, but we were raised with this, show us your map of Tassie, because Tasmania is shaped profoundly like a portal. So I grew up with that denigrating show us your map of Tassie. I have flipped that on its head to be this beautiful symmetry number 8, where the women, the Tasmanian women in my new novel, claim that power, and they regenerate their local community, bang, right when COVID hits. So I've given you the ending of my next novel, but it's not out for another year or so. So, but
we'll forget.
You know, thank you for the platform for this, Helen. Kelly, because I've been sitting on this for 10 years waiting for it to blossom and bloom. So the seeds that Nicole and you guys have been sowing, they're blooming now, and you can feel it. It's so exciting. So, you know, thank you, Biggie, who's our tech guy who's coordinating all of this, because to have us from all around different corners of the world is phenomenal, and that's where our power will rise, really. Yeah.
So Rachel, have you got any, do you want to plug any of your latest book? Like, how can people find you? Where can they buy you? Have you got a website? How do they get into this amazing world of yours?
I've got RachelTreasure.com. This is one self-published book. It's Dog Speak, which is dog training. Nicole's got that for her little puppy Ray.
I have. I've been using it.
Yeah, that you need it. And then I've got a colouring in book, which is 50 shades of hay, which goes with my and this is all tongue-in-cheek, 50 bales of hay, because I wrote that after you know, the 50 shades of grey literary masterpiece right now.
Yes, but good cover.
This is my latest novel, White Horses. So you can find me, it's racheltreasure.com. I've got a Facebook page. You can see more of the stuff we're doing on our land with our flirt, and and basically I weave the vision into this with a bit of you know, love in there as well. So Facebook page, racheltreasure.com, and available at all bookstores, online, Booktopia, you know, you name it. So thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have to get Rachel's books into the smart box. I'm really feeling it. We're going to have to get you into our Carbonate smart box and shipped around to farmers all around Australia.
Definitely. Thank you, Kelly. That'd be great. Yeah.
Carl, have you got anything coming up? Any events happening?
I have a Read Your Soil Like a Pro course that's coming up on the 15th of November. So that's an online course that's really designed to help you delve into how do you read and interpret what you're seeing visually with your soil, what are some of the different tools, lots and lots of really fun demonstrations in there for people to do with their kids right now. So if some of you are homeschooling or just wanting to really, you know, dive in with your kids, and like there's some things on like how to count insects and dung, you know, like really get dirty with it all. And I'm super excited about that course, and it's the first one. I started developing it last November, and it timed perfectly really with everything that's changed kind of in the world. Is like, okay, maybe we need to be thinking about online content, because I think I've had 50 workshops cancelled this year. So I'm like, okay, rethink how we work in the world. And it's actually been such a delight, and it's like a really creative process building a curriculum and thinking about things like that. So we have another 3 courses that I hope to have released. It'll be next year sometime, but this one's just really on the reading, on like how do you dig into that. So it's on my website under soil courses. So my website is integritysoils.co.nz.
Perfect. Okay.
It's all part of the evolution, isn't it? We've all been forced to get our heads around Zoom, podcast, online platforms. Like, it's really part of this shift. It's the regenerate, again, of the whole way we can tell our stories and communicate and connect on a whole worldwide scale. Really amazing to watch. Yeah. It's a privilege, guys. We're standing here in a shift in history. It's a privilege. We will be the generation that regenerates the earth. We will be that.
I feel like raising my skirt, but I've got twins on.
I was on a podcast recently, and I kind of forgot it was on Zoom, and I took my top off because it was really hot. Like, I did it like this, and I'm halfway taking it off, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? And a bra that looked like I had this bra on, so no one knew that I was actually taking my top off, and I was like, this is the drawback.
This is the privilege of lockdown. You can make all those mistakes while no one's watching yet, but soon enough you're going to have a massive online audience, both of you women. So I really wish you the best. Like, it's been amazing to chat and like working forward together in some capacity. Amazing. It's just an honor. So thank you for both being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
Have an awesome day.
Yeah, man.
And we'll be on
You guys
YouTube.
have an awesome day.
Yeah, we'll be on YouTube and we'll share it with everyone, so it'll be recorded. So, yeah.
So, Miss McCosker, would you like to go out by letting our audience know the next film that's coming up, how they can link onto that and get involved, and if they're a farmer, how they can connect with our platform and the smart boxes?
Yeah, so the next film is, as we said, The Power of Community, and we've got the National Regenerative Agriculture Day Facebook page. All the information will be on there. And also, if you want to sign up to as a farmer for Carbonate, it's carbonate with an 8.org.au, and you can sign up, check us all out, and we'll be there. So, yeah, exciting time.
And we're starting to gear up for the National Regen Ag Day, which is, of course, Valentine's Day, so the 14th of Feb. So not long to go before we start rolling out some amazing events all around the world. So we look forward to Rachael and Nicole participating in 2021's NRAD Day as we heal the heart of our food chain.
Fantastic.
So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are in the world. It's a big week this week for the world. So we will send our love and light across the grid now, and everyone enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Kel. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. See you guys later.
See ya.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks for
See ya.
organizing.